Owners have determined that you can use an external propane tank to provide propane to the Truma and the propane stove if you have one. So I'm going to show you a safe way to use one of these on your Travato. But first, let's review how the propane system works. Outside valve has fill for the technician, a drain, and an on-off switch. Under the Travato is the propane tank where the fill comes in. There is a pressure gauge there. And then over here we have the solenoid valve assembly. This valve turns the propane off completely if you ever need to do maintenance on any of the regulators. Its normal position is open. This is the solenoid with attached wires. So part of this valve assembly is a little 12-volt electromagnet coil that goes around a shaft. Inside that shaft is a spring-loaded needle valve. That valve is normally closed. The spring is always pushing it upwards to keep the propane off. The way propane gets turned on is the switches get turned on, which then sends electricity to the coil, which creates a magnetic field, which pulls down this little needle valve, and then gas is allowed to flow throughout the system. So the way this is wired in the Travato is there's a wire coming from the fuse panel that goes to one of the posts on the outside switch. There's a wire that goes from the other post of the outside switch to one of the posts on the inside switch, and then a wire leading from the other post of the inside switch to the positive side of the magnetic coil on the solenoid. And then a wire coming out of the negative side back to the fuse panel. And you'll notice that in my Travato, the propane gas leak detector is on the same circuit. If the fuse blows, the propane gas leak detector loses power and the solenoid loses power, so you cannot run propane. Normally, the outside switch is turned on, and that way the only thing you have to do is turn on the inside switch in order to run propane. When both switches are on, the circuit is closed and power runs to the magnetic coil, which powers the coil, creating a magnetic field, which pulls down the little valve assembly and allows propane to flow. If the outside switch is off and the inside switch is on, the circuit is open. And one of the things to do is whenever you get your propane filled, make sure that outside switch gets turned back on. That way, when you need to, you can run propane from the inside switch only. So both switches must be on, and when they are both on, you have propane available to your appliances. With both switches turned on, the propane can flow to the 30 psi regulator, then to the two-stage regulator that reduces it to RV appliance pressure. It goes to a distribution manifold where one line will go to the Truma furnace, one line will go to your propane stove if you have one, and one line goes to the back accessory connection at the back of the RV. This uses a quick disconnect and has an on-off valve, and is primarily used to connect appliances such as outdoor barbecue. This is the connection that we can use to connect an external propane tank. The way to do that is you need a two-stage regulator that's RV appliance rated, and you need to connect a hose with a quick disconnect to that regulator. The external tank is plugged into the external port, and you're ready to use external propane as a source of fuel for your Travato's appliances. With an external propane tank configured with a proper two-stage regulator to get it to the right pressure and a quick disconnect connected to the accessory port on the outside, you're providing propane into the vehicle without using the onboard tank. You leave the onboard switch off, and as you can see, we have propane running. Seriously? There's a problem, however, with potentially creating a fire hazard if you connect it just this way. You're feeding propane from the opposite direction, and there's a chance that when the propane goes to the onboard regulator, that it may actually start to leak from there, from one of the vents. This is a very good, not terribly expensive gas leak detector. So I'm going to turn off the gas, put a little bit of gas on. So it detects gas. So right now we have the appliance off, and we're going to go outside. So as you can see, using an external propane source the way it is there creates a problem, and it may be undetected. So what I discovered through testing is that when an appliance is running, like the propane stove or the Truma furnace, that it pulls some of that pressure off of the lines, and the onboard regulator stops to vent propane. But as I turn off an appliance, that pressure rebuilds. And we start venting propane again. So what does that mean? It means that if you're running an appliance, you've reduced the possibility that propane will leak from the onboard regulator when you're using an external tank. However, if you're boondocking, cold camping, going to bed at night, you're running the Truma furnace, you've lowered the temperature, at some point during the night the furnace is going to stop working. When it does, your external tank is going to cause the onboard regulator to start venting propane, obviously creating a fire hazard and, frankly, injury or death. So hooking up on the accessory port just the way it is not the safe way to go. I have created a mod that is a much safer way to go. To make this mod, I used a 36-inch length of propane hose that has a 1/2 inch internal diameter with male flare ends on both sides, as well as a matching brass valve that has 1/2 inch female flare ends on both sides. I assembled the valve to the hose. I crawled under my Travato and removed the current connection coming out of the regulator and connected the 36-inch hose to that end. I then connected the existing hose to the new cutoff valve and then mounted it under my Travato. There it is. That's one safe way of using an external propane tank, by installing a cutoff valve that separates the onboard regulator from the rest of the system. Easy enough to turn on. Once I got everything connected, I can find the valve here. Now we've set for outside, and it's always a good idea to put a safety flag